I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. The Cranbrook History Center would like to acknowledge that we are located on the unceded traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, and we'd like to extend our gratitude for the opportunity to live and learn in mutual respect and appreciation. At the center, we always strive to create a community of lifelong learners, and we are so grateful today that we can be learning from Sophie Pierre, who is an elder in the Ktunaxa Nation. I would like to just give a little brief introduction about Ed Talks for those who aren't familiar with them. You can see the little logo up in the corner there. These are monthly talks that we have at the center. So the third or fourth Wednesday of every month, we invite a different speaker in to talk about a topic relevant to the East Kootenays, to Cranbrook. Actually, this month is really special because not only do we have one Ed Talk, we have three that we're putting together with Wildsight Kimberley Cranbrook to create that connection between the history that we talk about with our organization and the efforts that they do for environmental activism. And so I actually want to pass it off to Corinne to say a few words about Wildsight.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Corinne Highwood, and I'm the interim branch manager with Wildsight Kimberley Cranbrook. We are a nonprofit environmental organization with an office based in Kimberley. Some of you may already be familiar with some of our projects, such as the apple capture program that we run every year. We operate the Kimberley Community Garden, the Kimberley Farmers Market. We run a number of environmental education programs, including those at McGinty Lake, apple capture in schools, and Camp Odyssey, our summer camp program, among other things that we get involved with related to local environmental issues and really amazing events like this, where we can partner with the Cranbrook History Center for this, our inaugural partnership. We're very excited about this lecture series, and we look forward to collaborating more in the future. So thank you all for coming and supporting both our organizations tonight. And we really we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us tonight, Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. You make a great point. I actually did not mention fully that this is a part of a three-part series. And so Sophie is our inaugural speaker, talking about the traditional relationship with this land. And then you, of course, saw on the event page that we have two speakers, one next week and the one after, to fill out the series about restoring the historical relationship with nature that we're focusing on. So I'd like to introduce Sophie now. For those of you who are not familiar with her, Sophie Pierre was born in Cranbrook and raised on the St. Mary's Indian Reserve. She grew up attending the Kootenay Indian Residential School as well as Mount Baker High School, and after attending college at Camosun, she dove into work with the St. Mary's Band. So she was involved in the key formation of the Ktunaxa Kinbasket Tribal Council. She served for 30 years on the St. Mary's Band Council, 25 of which she was the chief of the band. In addition to all of this, she was serving on the board of the College of the Rockies. She has an Order of BC, and she was named the Chief Commissioner of the BC Treaty Commission in 2009, for which she received the Officer of the Order of Canada for her work. So we are so lucky to have Sophie here with us today, because as the opening speaker for this three-part series, she is bringing an incredible knowledge and expertise about the history and present day of this land. I hope that her presentation will help ground this series, because I think it's important that we all understand that in our pursuit of respecting wildlife and our natural surroundings, it is important that we can always recognize that we are reliant on the knowledge and expertise of our Indigenous peers. And so without further ado, I will pass it off to Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see those of you that I can see, and good to know that there are so many people out there that are interested in our discussion this evening. I want to first of all thank Natalie and Corinne and who's the other lady? Courtney. Yes, the organizers for this, the two organizations, the Historic Society, and then also, of course, Wildsight. What I want to take you through for the next half hour or so is really three areas, kind of making it easy on primarily on me. I'm going to talk a little bit about the past, what we're doing here in the present, and then the future. Because although the talk is listed as restoring our historical relationship with nature, there's no point in restoring that if we don't have a good plan of how we're going to do that going into the future. And I just want to say that I think that the first thing that we need to do in restoring that historic relationship that we have with nature is just to get our feet back on the ground and to be out there. And I know that if you're living here in Ktunaxa Ktunaxa, you're probably, particularly as a choice for where you want to live as opposed to a city, it's probably because you know the importance, you know how beautiful the area is, and you know how it feels to your soul when you do have your feet on the ground and you're there as one and fully part of nature. So in order to start talking about the Ktunaxa's historical relationship with the land, of course, we're talking about a relationship that goes back thousands of years. From the area of the Columbia, the present Columbia River, if you think about the map, where the Columbia takes a big bend, like it goes north when it comes as a little stream to begin with out of the mountains, just right around just above Windermere Lake, comes out of the mountains and it goes north. And at the Big Bend, that's the place that we call Yakleki. And it goes along and comes out from the mountains at Ktunaxa Nation, which today we call Revelstoke. Carries on through what is now the Arrow Lakes area, all through to where the Kootenai River, the present Kootenai River, meets the Columbia. And that's at a place called Ktunaxa. And Ktunaxa is very apt name. It's descriptive. It's where two major rivers meet. Today, we all call it Castlegar. Ktunaxa is the Ktunaxa traditional name for that place. And our Ktunaxa Ktunaxa goes on to the south to place around in the area of what's present day Missoula, Montana. That's Ktunaxa. And there's Ktunaxa, where we have community of Ktunaxa that live in Montana, and then all the way back up, along the Rocky Mountain Trench into the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains. We have place names out in the Lethbridge and Calgary area because we also use those lands. I'm describing that because it is within that land base where Ktunaxa, we call that Ktunaxa Ktunaxa. That is our homeland. It is within that land base where we have place names. I've shared some of them with you. Place names like Akisgakle'it. Many of you that live in Cranbrook would know that is the traditional name for Cranbrook, and Kukama'anam, which is Kimberley, and all the other place names that we have within our traditional territory. The Ktunaxa language is an isolate. If you think of that and think about there are 11 major language families in Canada. And from those 11 major language families, there are dozens and dozens of other languages that come off of that. The Salishan language, for example, to our west and south, from the Salishan language, you have the Shehwapmuk and the Okanagan and other languages. And then to the east of us, you have the Blackfoot and you have the Athapascan language groups, the Dene language groups. So it's a very interesting point that right within the middle of that, here in the Rocky Mountain Trench, that you would have a group of people who spoke and still speak an isolate language. And within that isolate language, we've got all these place names so that we know where we go for certain activities, whether they're spiritual activities or, they're activities for hunting and gathering. There are activities to gather, like not gathering picking berries, but gathering socially as people. And there are places where we did trade. The West Kootenay is a good description of that. That's a place where different groups, different peoples would meet, and we would do trade in that area, in around Ktunaxa and north of that, around the Arrow Lakes area. So we've got the land that identifies the Ktunaxa people. We have our language, and then we have all of our culture and our ways of being, our what we call Aknumutstilil, and that is the law of creation, the law from the Creator, that gives us the authority that we have for being able to live here and carry on in our various activities. The Aknumutstilil is there's it's a strict law, and it's because it comes from the Creator, and from that we have our values and our principles as a people. One of which is the respect of Akhamis Apikapsin. That means the spirit of all living things. That is one of our most basic and our most important values, is that we recognize and we respect the spirit of all living things. And everything that we have around us is a living thing. So those are where the laws were handed down from the Creator from the time of our creation. Many of you have probably heard over the years our creation story. And that creation story is very similar to creation stories all over the world. It's similar to the creation story that you find with Christianity. And I think that it was because of that, the similarities of that when the missionaries first came here, that the Ktunaxa were able to relate with the missionaries and eventually to set aside some of our own beliefs and to take on Christianity. So you've got the description of the land, you've got the language which brings us together, our structures for being, our Aknumutstilil, our laws, and our values, the value of all living things. So the land, that being the most important value, that respecting all living things. From our creation story, human beings were the last to be created, and the Creator called together all of the animals, the plants, the water, the elements, to talk to all of them for the coming of the human being. And there was an agreement from all of these, from Akhamis Apikapsin, all of these beings, that human beings would be able to use the animals, the plants, the water, air, the fire, and the weather, all of that came from the Creator. And in exchange, we have a very solemn responsibility to be looking after that, to be the stewards of that. At the end of our creation story, we lose two of the major beings, one that looked after the land and the other that looked after the water. And as human beings were created, as these two were dying off, human beings were being created. So we were given that responsibility, and it's a responsibility that we take very seriously. The indigenous knowledge in North America, well, in indigenous knowledge really the world over, you're finding that there is more of a realization that indigenous knowledge is something that will help and will support the human race going forward. That the indigenous knowledge, because it's so ancient, that the respect for that that has not been really exercised for the last couple hundred years, particularly here in North America, that we're recognizing now that a lot of what we consider to be Western science and to be, things that are scientific sort of determinations, that a lot of that actually comes from indigenous knowledge, from people who have lived on the lands for just thousands of years. You kind of get to know your area if you're going to survive. So we have a pretty good sense of what is good for our area. And we also think that it's also necessary to emphasize that the melding, the blending, the partnership of taking the Western science, taking Western teachings, and relating them back to their source, their origin source, that is what leads us to organizations and to awareness of protecting the land. That is the responsibility that we were born with. We, specifically myself as a Ktunaxa, but in fact all human beings, that's what we're born with, is that responsibility. That if we continue to pollute our land, if we continue to use it in ways that are not sustainable, we know that it's just not, we're not leaving a very good legacy for our children, our future generations. Another value and another principle that comes from Ktunaxa is that whatever you do, you realize that it's going to have an effect not just on yourself and on your children and grandchildren, but on many, many generations going forward. So there are some teachings that talk about 7 generations into the future. And with us, it comes back to our Ktunaxa language. We have in our language, we can, you talk about your family lines, and you talk about your family lines going into the future. And it's very similar to that whole teaching of 7 generations into the future, because at some point, you don't have a name for that. You just call them, the people that are still to come. So with the, when you're talking about Ktunaxa and you're recognizing that you have a responsibility for Ktunaxa, which is the spirit of all living things, that is not a belief that is just for humans, it's for everything that is alive. And that is what supports us as human beings. That is how our people lived for who knows how long. There's all kinds of archaeological support that say that there's been continuous human occupancy of this land for at least 15,000 years. And we have, when you think about that, right here within this Rocky Mountain Trench, you have people who have a language that is isolate, there's no similarity to any of the indigenous languages around us. And that language has been able to survive and come into this 21st century. The the responsibility that we had, I would say that we've been able to, we've managed pretty well. That despite, especially in these last couple hundred years, despite the challenges that have come upon the Ktunaxa, that we continue to live by the values and live by the laws that were given to us by the Creator, by the Aknamutstishit. We had an example of that, and we were able to bring that to the forefront with the partnership of organizations like Wildsight. And of course, I'm talking about Ktunaxa, also known as the Jumbo. Now, when that whole thing was starting up, and we just thought, well, I mean, that's just crazy. There's no way that can possibly happen, because it just doesn't make any sense. And it wasn't making sense environmentally. It didn't make any sense economically. And so we were supportive of those arguments. And yet, at the end of the day, we actually had to put on the line our own spiritual beliefs about what that area means, and the fact that it was a spiritual place. And any of you that have been up that way, you know that it's a spiritual place. You can't, it grabs you as you're going in there. You know it's a spiritual place. The argument that we took to the Supreme Court of Canada, of course, that didn't have a chance. I mean, there's no way that the Western society is going to accept that Indigenous spirituality is going to be more important than economic well-being. So because this area is spiritual, there were other means that came forward. And I would expect that many of you do know that now Ktunaxa and the spirit, where the grizzly bear goes, that will be protected for forever, for all the generations that we can see going forward. And that was another way that became available. That came down, and we as Ktunaxa, we know that is the Creator protecting what the Creator needs to protect. When we talk about our responsibilities of making sure that the land, and it's not just like when I say land, I'm talking about all living things. It's easier if I just say because then it means more to me that way, and I hope that I can explain it well enough so that it'll mean more to you also. The spirit of all living things. It's much more than just the land. But when we talk about the protection of that and how we have a responsibility, I'm greatly challenged when I hear people talking about their right to use the land for, well, say like what they were wanting to do at Ktunaxa, build this 5,000 bed ski resort on a glacier that's dying. That there's somehow human beings have this right. And, I encourage people to, before we can exercise rights, to recognize that before we can exercise rights, we must maintain our responsibility to ensure that there is a right for future generations to live, to be alive the way we are. So when I hear people talking about their right to go into the backcountry, their right to snowmobile, their right to do all of these things that disturb land, that disturb the animals, that disturb Akhamis Akapsin, I wonder what their children, their grandchildren are going to think about how they lived up to their responsibility of ensuring that there is life for their great-grandchildren, their great-great-grandchildren, 7 generations into the future. Perhaps that doesn't matter, but it will always matter. It is what makes us Ktunaxa. It'll always matter with Ktunaxa. And so we will always be there to remind people, sometimes to be a pain in the neck about it, but that is our responsibility, and we take that very seriously. So in terms of when we're talking about the historic relationship with nature, the historic relationship with nature is no different than our present day relationship with nature. And it is no different than our future relationship with nature. Not unless we abandon our responsibilities and we instead demand our right to do whatever the hell we want. Pardon me for to do whatever we want. Then we are going to be breaking that bond. So I think that the relationship with nature presently, you know, we still have a lot of beautiful, beautiful areas, you know, and we all want to get out there. Best way to do it is on your own 2 feet. It's the hardest way. And I'm not doing it anymore because my knees are shot. So I'm lucky to just walk around my backyard. But I'm very fortunate because I live right along the St. Mary's River. So it's okay. And I know that, you know, that isn't possible for a lot of people, that that sometimes, you know, you're taking all these toys to go out and enjoy nature. And just remember that you're not the only one out there. There are a whole lot of other living things that are there. Just before I start talking about the present and going into the future, well, no, I guess it does relate to our present. That I talked about our values about protecting our and protecting it for future generations. We run into difficulties with the government, both federal, provincial, sometimes even, you know, they're regional and maybe municipal, but we run into difficulties with governments. And quite often what causes those difficulties, rather than finding the way that we can meet our responsibilities to protect the land going into the future, we end up having to deal with people who are just thinking about the next election cycle. And that gets to be difficult. And I see you on there, Wayne, nodding your head. You're thinking about another election cycle, but I know that in your heart that you are a human being that believes in and I appreciate that. But that's really where we end up having our difficulties right now in the present, in our present generation. Those difficulties come when we kind of knock heads about things like Qatmuk, and we're knocking heads with people who are thinking about the next election cycle and whether or not they're going to be able to get elected, you know, based on offering certain kinds of activities, maybe that are not really good for us in the long term. Some of the concerns and, you know, some of the responsibilities that we're finding right now as the Ktunaxa Nation, and I know that it's not just us as the Ktunaxa Nation. It's each and every one of you, particularly if you're participating in these discussions. It's the protection of our water. You know, that is getting to be, I mean, it's going to be sort of the next major responsibility, that we must get out there and live up to our responsibility in terms of protecting our water. This last year and a half, year and few months has taught us that sometimes the air we breathe is, can be dangerous. That when we have diseases that are spreading around, it's frightening to think if anything were to happen to our water system, what that would do, because all life depends on water. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about us out here in the mountains. We're pretty fortunate. The Creator gives us fresh water. Every year we get all the snow melts and it fills up our rivers and cleans out the rivers and makes them beautiful and keeps them beautiful, cleans out our lakes. And it's just concerning that there's threats, there's challenges in how we can continue to protect our waters. The Ktunaxa, our whole creation story and our whole way of being is really surrounded around water. A lot of the whole theme that runs through our creation story has to do with water. And so I know that as we go forward, we're throughout the world, and then come a little bit closer to home. For all of us, we need to encourage the partnerships that we've had in the past and those that we can create into the future for protecting our water, for protecting that for all living things, including our own future generations. I realized that I had also wanted to talk, when I was talking about the past, I wanted to talk a little bit about Chief Isidore and the relationship that as settlers were moving into the area, in this instance, it might be some of your ancestors were coming here into this area for the first time, that there was some confrontations that we had over the past, and it was simply because the people were wanting to protect their way of life. This had always been Ktunaxa Amakis, and where we have Agis, which is Cranbrook. For anyone that's living there now, that was an area that was used by Ktunaxa for millennia, for forever. And really, when you think about just where it sits between the two creeks, Agis, it means two. Gakleet, it's like where two creeks come down. It's that area. Agis Gakleet. So it's the two creeks, and it was a perfect place for Chief Isidore, and before that, all of his previous ancestors had always used that. As they were moving through, our people were nomadic. We moved up and down throughout the land, because we knew that being the kind of climate, being the type of land base that it is, that need to keep moving in order to sustain ourselves and to make sure that the land can continue to sustain itself and the animals can continue to sustain themselves. So Chief Isidore had many had buildings, and he had been living in that particular area until Colonel Baker came along, and this was in 1887, I think. 1884 is when the Indian Reserves were created. So this was around 1887, and Isidore was still there. Colonel Baker wanted it, and the government of the time, sent in Colonel Sam Steele to help mediate, and eventually Isidore moved to another area that he was also used to using anyway, which is now called Isidore's Ranch, and it's down along the Kootenai River. So that's part of one of the reserves that is a part of our overall St. Mary's Indian Reserves. And I bring that up because despite how long people are, live here, and the fact that our education system today is much better than, oh God, it's way better than it was when I went to school. When I went to school, they taught us about the Mohawks, and because they were warmongering savages that killed off, everybody. That's who we learned about. There was no such thing as learning about Ktunaxa, which is confusing to Indigenous children when you don't learn about yourself, you don't see yourself in the education system. So now, the thing that it's important that, as we go forward and, as we have things like, standstill days, and that there is recognition that there was life, like a lot of really, really good life here long before the creation of the municipality, and that in fact, Chief Isidore had a lot to do with that. That was his family's land, and his family's that was where he thought that his family was going to have a future. So as we go forward, then I think that what I want to end off with is talking about the Ktunaxa Nation and our work that is ongoing, that has had some success, and I think that we're going to continue to have success going forward, is within our partnerships with everyone who is making their home in Amag Ktunaxa. And I think that in order for us to have those successful partnerships, that there is a responsibility on anyone who is making their home here in Amag Ktunaxa to know what the history is, and to understand it, and talk to us. We're not unreachable. Once this darn pandemic is over and our government building is open again, the old central school, there's many opportunities on how we can continue to have reciprocal type of education back and forth, and that we can continue to work to ensure that the future for our generations coming that are still yet to be born, that they will be the beneficiaries of all of us who are here right here this evening, that they're the beneficiaries of all of us having lived up to the first and foremost thing, which we've always known as Ktunaxa, which we've always believed in, and that is our responsibility to Akhamis Qapsin. And we can have that phrase made available to anyone that wants to learn it. Akhamis, it's the spirit of all living things. Akhamis Qapsin. And that's what's going to ensure that all of our future generations are enjoying the type of life that we've had, and that we're going to ensure that not just the land, but the water, the air, all of that will continue to be in such a way that when we're talking about our relationship with nature, that it will always be the relationship that is for the benefit of Akhamis Qapsin. So I see that I've gone a little bit over my time, Natalie, but I'd be happy to have a discussion with people. So I'm going to stop talking and give you a chance to ask questions.
I think I speak for everyone when I say I could just listen to you talk. It's what you're sharing is, well, it's new to me at least, because I've moved to Cranbrook recently, and I appreciate hearing these stories so much, but I do want to open it up to the audience. If you were interested in asking a question to Sophie, if you unmute yourself, then I can call upon you and we can get this conversation going. So I'm going to keep an eye out on the chat here to see if anybody, if you don't feel like leaving, if asking a question out loud, you can also leave a question in the chat and we can read that out loud for Sophie. And if no one else has questions, then I'll be happy to ask mine. So maybe I'll start us off. I was really, I guess, taken. Like I said, I'm new to Cranbrook, so I'm not familiar with the Ktunaxa language. And I wonder what value you think reintroducing this language back into the way everybody speaks here could bring to our appreciation for nature and our relationship with it.
Thank you for that question. That is it's a very important question because, like I said, this language, it doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And if you're living here, if this is your home, Amak es Ktunaxa is your home. This is the language that has always been spoken for, I don't know, thousands of years. That's the language that's been spoken here. And yes, you know, we see that there is more of an appreciation for that within general society. You'll see that there are many signs around, you know, that show the Ktunaxa language. Thankfully, they're in our schools, and that way the next generation has a little better start than we did in terms of understanding each other. And you know, they're starting with the knowledge that there is a language that belongs right here. You know, we visit other parts of the world and are amazed by, you know, the history and the language and everything, and we have the same thing right here.
Thank you. Does anybody, oh, I see Wayne has unmuted himself. Wayne, go ahead.
Well, I just want to start by thanking you, Sophie. Once again, you have been so inspiring for so many years, and you've worked really, really hard to get the ethics of the Ktunaxa out there on the land. And I just want to encourage you that you're making really, really good progress because in the last little while, I'm working on a project around conservation, and I know industry, and particularly tech and Canfor, have both said that what they're interested in is moving forward through partnerships with the Ktunaxa. Mm-hmm. And that took a lot of years and a lot of hard work on your part to get there. But I was so heartened to hear that coming from both of those companies, that that is the way forward for them and for conservation and the land. So thank you for that, because that is an ethic that many of us, of course, believe in. And you have taken that ethic and been able to put it forward in a way that has the respect now that quite frankly, the Ktunaxa's approach to life deserves. So just wanted to thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. I appreciate that. I too am grateful for the relationship that we have now with most of the, well, definitely all the major industries that are that operate within Amak es Ktunaxa. And even, you know, it goes beyond that. So yeah, I'm grateful that we've been able to come to this place, because we certainly were not here. You know, when I think about the history of the Sullivan mine, for example, and I think about the history of how that mine started and the Ktunaxa that were killed because of that, you know, that and that there was never ever any kind of benefit that came to Akam or any of the Ktunaxa for the whole life of that mine. And now the relationship that we have with tech, which is like just the exact opposite of that. So yeah, we definitely have come a long way, and that's all of us together have come a long way.
Thanks so much for bringing that up, Wayne. Stuart has a question now. Thank you, Stuart. Stuart, you're muted currently. There you go.
Thank you very much, Sophie. I thoroughly enjoyed your talk. It took me back to when I heard your son Joe make a presentation to the school district way back in the late 90s, I believe. And he talked about how he hoped that people would use the greeting the Ktunaxa use, which escapes me just now, the same way as when he gets off the plane in Hawaii and everyone says aloha. But anyway, my question is, it was I guess at the time it must have been a tremendously brave decision on whoever part to save the residential school and not raze it to the ground, because it's one of, what, 2 or something left in Canada, and how you have used it, the Ktunaxa people have used it to, apparently to their advantage. Would you like to talk about that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I've kind of went over that because I can talk about that and talk about it for a long time. And today I was wanting more to talk about our relationship with the land. But yes, and thank you, Stuart, for recognizing that that was a decision that was it was monumental for us to make. And quite often, as I get into these older years, people will ask me, you know, what is, you know, what are you proud of in terms of accomplishments? Whether, you know, and I see this as an accomplishment of our nation. And I always go to that, that decision to take the former residential school. And as Natalie indicated when she introduced me, I personally spent 9 years in that school. And so to take that with its all of the horribleness of it, you know, everything that was so destructive for our people, and to recognize that in order for us to move forward, simply knocking a building down, that doesn't take away what happened to you. And we had many of our people that wanted to do that. They wanted us to knock it down. But luckily we had elders and youth. We had enough of our Ktunaxa Nation citizens who recognized that it would be much more meaningful and much more important for us if we were on our own to take it back and turn it into something positive for the future. And yeah, so I'm pretty proud of us that we were able to accomplish that. And it was no simple simple feat when you figure that, you know, you've got 5 Indian bands. And so this is why I don't talk about St. Eugene, because it gets all kind of it's a long story. But there are 5 Indian bands. We own that together. It's not just Akam or St. Mary's. So to get 5 Indian bands on board to go forward with this, that you know, it was, and not only that, to come to an agreement to do this, but also to raise the money that was necessary, because back in those days, we, as 5 Indian bands, we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. You know, we had to be very, very creative in how we were able to put this whole package together, and to have an actual business plan that was going to be supported, and that we would find interested partners. So yeah,
you have a lot to be proud of. It's one of my favorite places to walk, and 2 or 3 years ago we had the classrooms to community classrooms, and you know, it was so memorable when Chief Joe Pierre, he started off the circle where I think there were something like 300 of us, and it was one way of meeting everybody.
Yeah.
And it was so powerful. And to see some of your youth taking part as well. Anyway, many thanks.
Thank you.
What a wonderful question, Stuart. It makes me now want to ask Sophie back to give another talk at the center all about St. Eugene. So hopefully when we're back in person, I can try and convince you, Sophie. I have a question from Irma in the chat. She's asking about whether there's any resources for those of us who do not know the Ktunaxa language so that we can learn the names of these places and integrate them into our own vernacular.
Yes, we've got, I'll find out from our language, and we have a traditional knowledge and language sector within our nation office. And I know that we have resources. And yes, definitely, I see that you were hoping that I could write out, the names of these places. Yes, definitely. What I can promise for all of you that are here is that tomorrow I'll make that available to Natalie and I guess maybe just to you, and then you can disseminate it as you wish.
Yes.
And yes, once we're all back in business and being able to see and visit with each other, I would encourage everyone to participate in one of the tours that goes through St. Eugene that talks about the history. Mm-hmm. And also, there's we have a program called Speaking Earth, which was it's a storytelling. You sit around the campfire. That will get back going again when this craziness that we're living in right now is finished.
I've read about Speaking Earth, and I'm so excited to be able to take part in it when everything opens back up. If you want to look into the chat, everybody, I've seen that there's a couple of different resources that are being posted there, in addition to what I will be emailing out from Sophie tomorrow. Yeah. I notice, Keith, you have your hand up, so I'll let you ask a question.
Thanks, Natalie. Thank you, Sophie. Always great to hear you speak. It's Keith Pell, and I just wanted to ask about, the thing that really impressed me about your initiative is you've really taken some initiative in the enterprise or the business side of it. And I noticed that you're developing a new building downtown. I was just wondering what the plan is for that building.
I can hardly keep up with it, Keith, and it's good to see you. I can barely keep up with what the nation is doing. But if you're talking about the one that used to be the, I think it's on 9th Avenue or something. It used to be the
furniture store.
The furniture store, yeah. That has been taken over by our health department. And so it's going to be, because right now we have a health section, and it's in the basement of our government building, and it's not really very nice, and it's way too small. So I don't know what all is going to be in there, but I know that it's the health unit of our nation government that's taken over that building.
Right. So I think you'd be commended for not only the investment in your own people, but also in the community. It's something that I think is really a welcome investment in the community, and something that'll bring much good to everyone involved.
Thank you, Keith. And the what's noticeable for us here, because we're close to living around the Cranbrook Kimberley area, is the investments that are going around here. But those are also we've also got investments that are going into the other communities. Because that's one thing I actually usually I would say that. I'm just assuming that the majority of you would know that our nation council has 4 communities. There's Agisqanuk, that is Columbia Lake, up in the Windermere area. Yaqanuki, that's in Creston. And Yaqit Aknukleit, that's Tobacco Plains, down on the border, South Country. And then, of course, here in Aqam, we also have the community, the Shuswap Indian Band. And that is, there are many, They're our relatives too, but they're not right now part of our nation government structure.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Dave Morley, you have your microphone unmuted. Do you have something to ask?
Hello, Sophie. Thanks a lot for the talk. We go back a little ways, don't we? On
we do.
Anyway, I was going to say that it seems to me that the first relationships between white men and Indian people in this area actually weren't all that bad. I can think of David Thompson, who had a lot of respect for Indians. He was married to one. And I turned to Sam Steele, who showed real affection for them as well, and did what he could and left the buildings at Fort Steele to the reserve when he left to be used as a school and whatever else. Then the next person I would think of is James Wardner, who learned of the existence of the mine at Moyi from an Indian called Pierre, and rewarded him quite handsomely, and the reserve quite handsomely as a result of that. So it wasn't, that's
no.
So that my final question is, oh, it's true.
Oh, well, we hope that Biat was, his name was Nishkotam. We hope that he was rewarded handsomely as he was promised. He was promised a spot in heaven. The financial gains that came from the Moye mine, that of course built our beautiful St. Eugene Church, which is a treasure for our community. You know, I will, definitely accept that. It's a beautiful building. Again, once we're able to see each other again and start visiting, you know, that if you have any interest in stained glass windows, I have to tell you that this is where the profits of that mine went into. Stained glass windows were shipped directly from Italy. So if you've ever been to Notre Dame, our stained glass is just about as nice. And then the beautiful altar and, you know, all of that. So yeah, that was our reward for Moye mine.
Yeah, well, actually, if Pierre didn't get the rewards he deserved, it wasn't so much James Wardner's fault. There was a middleman in there.
Yeah, no doubt. The middleman was Father Kokala.
Yeah. But James Wardner, he wrote a very interesting book, and I'd encourage anybody to read that. He had a very exciting life.
Thank you for your question, Dave. I want to finish off, Sophie, with a last question, bringing us back to the nature topic at hand that we've been discussing in your speech. I was wondering if you would be willing to share a moment for you in maybe early in your life that really was maybe a catalyst in understanding the importance of our relationship with this land and how that might have affected you.
For many years, for like my growing up years, my family would hitch up the horses to the buggy, and we would take it up Lumberton and go and spend like a month out in Cooper Lake. And I always loved that, particularly later on when after, you know, I got to be 7, 8, 9 years old. By then, by the time I was 8 or 9, I think we probably had an old vehicle. But I also really treasure those memories of when we went up by horse and buggy. And I remember it was a place that I felt very much that I was there before, that this is where I belonged, just being out in the mountains. I also want to share another experience I had much later in life. I was in my late 40s, and along with Wayne Choquette, there was a group of us hiked up to the quarry that, you know, it's part of the top of the world. and it's the chert that this tool that Ktunaxa used for thousands of years, and it's some of the hardest rock. Makes for good tools. Again, I had one of those, and this is as an adult, so I have a much clearer memory of this, of how I felt when we got to the quarry, and after we set up camp and that, and I went for a walk, and I went around this bend, and there was like a natural bench, and there were pieces of chert that were laying on the ground and on the bench, and it was like, my ancestors had just got up and left like 20 minutes before. I sat down on that bench and I picked up those that rock, and yeah, it was a very spiritual moment. So from the time I was a child, it's always been like, particularly when I'm in the mountains, and I'm sure that I'm touching a nerve for many of you, that's where you find your special place, is when you're in the mountains. That's why we live here.
Yeah, I think that I agree. Most of us will hear that, and it will really ring true for us. I'm sure we're all very excited now that the snow is melting and we're able to start getting hiking out again. I know I am.
Yeah, well, when you're out there, think about me. Bring my spirit out there, because I can't hike those mountain trails anymore.
Certainly. Well, we've come to the end of our event today. So we've got a number of people thanking you in the chat. I'm sure you can see it's kind of populating with hearts and thank you, Sophies. Everyone. Everyone is so happy that you were able to take the time and share your expertise and your knowledge with us. So thank you so much to everybody who came out today to enjoy and to learn from Sophie. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to take a moment to actually thank our sponsors as we close out. The Ed Talks, being able to host these events every month would not be possible without the support from the East Kootenai Community Credit Union, as well as the members of the Cranbrook History Center, whose commitment to the programming and events at our museum allow us to keep on going and invite such incredible speakers like Sophie. So thank you to all of you, and I'm going to finish off this presentation with a short film for those of you who are a little less familiar with the Cranbrook History Center.
The reason that we need to do fundraising here at the center is to ensure that we preserve the history.
The heritage rail cars, which aren't covered, are being protected currently with tarps, which is unsustainable.
It's a history of our country that I feel like almost in a way we're kind of slowly losing.
The elements are very harsh. The damage is beyond repair at times.
We need resources.
I value the Cranbrook History Center, not only because this is our history, our culture, our values, our beginning. It is also of national importance.
People need to come forward and help support with some funding so we can preserve these rail cars.
Hello, my name is Honor Neve.
I'm David Humphrey. Bob Wedham.
I'm Christy.
Mayor Lee Pratt.
Darren Brewer.
I'm Rob Gay.
I'm Kenny.
I believe in creating a legacy at the Cranbrook History Center.
Because it's through us that we're able to leave materials for future generations.
Provide the information of our history and where we've come from and where we're going.
For the future and for the present as well.
As a young person, I get to learn who was here before me and what they did and the hardships they went through.
And I love the Cranbrook History Center because the stories live here.
Because it's the heart of the community.
Because of the trains.
To share with the community and engage on a daily basis.
Because I love history.
Please donate today.
Donate.
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 Donate today.
Keep the legacy alive.
Okay. Keep the legacy alive.
Donate today and keep the legacy alive.
So thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you again, Sophie, for such a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, everyone. On Winikit.
And we will send out.
That means after, see you in a while. On Winikit. See you later.
On Winikit. And
on Winikit.
We will get those language pieces from you, Sophie, so that we can send it out to everybody. You can expect that in your email tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
For those of you who are still around and just exiting out, we are sending a feedback survey in about 10 minutes, and if you get that, we would love to hear your thoughts on the talk. The feedback is how we continue to get support from organizations in town and keep these events running. Thank you.